But one of the hardest things for them is to leave them alone, and them believing now that it's their job to protect this entire house. That's a big job for a dog, and it's exhausting. Okay, so consider limiting your dog's real estate. Consider closing those windows, putting them in a space where you say to them, look, this is your nice cozy corner. This is all you have to do. You know, every time that I sort of bring this up and I can see when I'm doing like in-person consults, I can see the person kind of shrinking up, and I can tell that they don't like what I'm saying. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? And inevitably it's like, well, I want my dog to have the whole house. And my question back is always, what do you expect the dog to be doing while you're not at home? And that's a good question to ask yourself. What do you expect the dog to be doing when you're not at home? Because if you're expecting the dog to like get out the old Jane Fonda workout tape and do a workout, make themselves a smoothie, maybe curl up on the couch and watch some daytime television, like most people, 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell me, well, I guess I'm expecting them to sleep. Oh, did I just age myself with that Jane Fonda tape comment? I think I did. Welcome back to part 3 of our 3-part barking series. We're finishing up today. Let's get into it. Ready to have a calm and peaceful life with your dog without the stress of those fear-based behaviors? Hi, I'm Tracy, and I've been there, overwhelmed by all the conflicting dog training advice and unsure of what to do next. But now I help dog lovers like you simplify your life with your dog by building confidence naturally, fostering trust, and addressing those fear-based challenges. So, if you're ready, stop chopping those chicken wieners and let's get to it. Hey there, friend. If you've already done all the training and the group classes and the leash work and the recall drills, and you're just not getting the results that you were looking for, this isn't about starting over. Here's the thing. Obedience is just part of the puzzle, and it makes up only a fraction of your day with your dog. So what if we went, beyond obedience? See what I did there? What if we focused on the other 98% of your life with your dog and made that fun and fulfilling and, dare I say, easy? The Fearless Framework doesn't replace obedience. It's the work that makes obedience mean something. This is my 3-step trust system to help you break a fear cycle, build real confidence in your dog and in yourself, because you and your dog deserve more than just the mechanics. You deserve real connection. Join me over at beyondobedience.ca/fearless. I can't wait to start this journey with you. I'll see you there. Well, hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome to Beyond Obedience, the podcast. Super duper welcome if you're brand new. If someone has shared this podcast with you, thank them from me. Give them a big hug. Thank them, because we are always trying to find more dog lovers like you and me to hang out together, to share these insights, to help, create an environment where we're learning as much as we can about the dog so that life with our dogs is easier, and all the things. I was going somewhere with that, but then it got away on me. All right. If you're brand new and this is the very first episode that you have heard on the podcast, I will tell you this is part 3 of a 3-part series. Wah, wah. Now, you don't need to go back right now and listen to the first 2 to get a gist of this. We are talking about barking. Barking. I wish I had a dog barking sound. I don't. I've got babies crying or something. It's dumb, but I have booing, slapping. What is that? I don't have a dog barking sound. You'd think somebody like me would have a sound of dogs barking. I feel like I've let you all down. There's a way to add my own sound effects on this machine. I don't know how to do it, but barking dogs should have been one of them. Anyway, we've been talking about barking I'll give you the short story here. I was asked to contribute to an online article about barking. The journalist had asked some really great questions, and I thought I would share my answers here with you on the podcast long before this article even gets out. So you're getting like a sneak peek of what I said. So there you go. One of the added bonuses of being a podcast listener. So we've covered a lot of things. Let me just scroll up on some of the questions that we've answered, and you can decide whether or not you want to stop and go over all of them. We answered the question, what are the main reasons that dogs bark, and are there common triggers? I talked about the different types of barking. Then we talked about breeds and how some breeds are more prone than others to barking. We've actually talked about whether or not it's a learned response versus a natural response, and do we just have to learn to live with it? And then we also discussed puppies and what we can do to prevent barking, and the importance of that. And then I think we left off last time at question 5, which was, what about adult dogs? Is it too late to train this out of them? And I was talking about how it's never too late. It's never too late to teach an old dog new tricks. So I think we are now on question number 7. There's only a couple of more questions, and then we're going to wrap up this barking series. I hope that you enjoyed it. Even if you don't have a dog that's a barker, I think it's important to understand the concepts around barking because it is a form of communication. It's not their number one form of communication, as we discussed in one of the previous episodes. Dogs, generally speaking, don't rely on vocalization as their main form of communication. It's generally, and we call that a secondary reinforcer to a conversation they've already had, meaning they've already told us what they felt and how they feel about things, and we didn't hear it. And they have to resort to making vocal noises to be like, hey, why are you not listening to me? So we talked a lot about that. And, but I think it's important for everybody to know, the importance of barking. I think one of the key things is, and I mentioned it in one of the other episodes, is that we actually don't want to train the dogs not to bark. That's not what you want. You don't want that. That's like saying, you don't want your partner to ever speak again. Wait a second. Some of us just went, oh, that'd be nice. But you know what I'm saying? We don't actually want that. We need to understand what it is that the dogs are trying to communicate. And then we want to sort of acknowledge and embrace what many of them were bred to do, right? Anytime that we're doing anything against nature, it's going to be harder. It's just going to be harder. You're going against the grain. You're going against nature. You're saying to them, don't be who you are. And that's not nice. It's not nice. So we don't like to do that. Now, that doesn't mean, if you have a dog that was bred to bark and the dog's driving you crazy, I'm going to say don't do anything. What I'm going to say is, how can we utilize that bark for something? How can we take that genetic resume and fulfill it so that it doesn't become a nuisance barking, it becomes part of actual communication. And that's what we're really talking about today. So let's get into the last of the questions that were sent to me. This is question number 6. How does furniture placement make a difference? And in brackets, she had actually said that a trainer had mentioned to her that having the bench in front of the window levels the dog up and makes it worse. And I said, how interesting. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Which is shocking, right? What's that famous saying? The only thing that 2 dog trainers will agree upon is that the third one is wrong. That's all we do. We just disagree with one another. But I wanted to talk about furniture because furniture 100% absolutely makes a difference. So couches, benches, and raised surfaces offer strategical advantages from your dog's perspective. Okay. So these places where they can get up, I call it, in our house, we call it leveling up, right? But to perch and observe and respond to perceived threats, it's a tactical advantage in survival. Levels are advantages. And this access can also feed alert barking. But more importantly than that, and this is why I wanted to talk about furniture, furniture itself and how we manage the environment overall is very important. So let's always keep in mind that barking is energy. Okay, the more energy that the dog puts into barking, the more robust the barking will be. So the more space and stimulation they have, the more amped up they're going to get, and the harder it is for them to come back down. So when we have furniture placement that one allows them to level up, and that definitely does change their perspective and it changes how they feel about things. But if they're also running from window to window, jumping up on couches, on the backs of couches, and barking and doing all of that crazy shenanigans, they're literally feeding into they're feeding into that energy, and it's getting them worked up, right? So it's important to recognize the placement of furniture does matter, but also you can utilize furniture and assist your dog to help prevent this escalation of barking, especially alert barking when you're not home, right? So I am not against curtains. Like, blackout curtains, block the visual triggers, right? By blocking the visual triggers, we're gonna actually help prevent the dog from rehearsing that behavior, that barking behavior, especially when you're not home. It's going to prevent them from just sort of being like, everything is out there and everything's going to get me, right? And the other thing that, some people might not approve of is the idea of utilizing crates or X-pens or baby gates to limit your dog's real estate. Now, I've mentioned this before because sometimes this is a harder concept for some folks to get, especially when you get dogs from a shelter system or they have a sad story, and we have this idea in our hearts, and we're good-natured people and we love our dogs. So we have this idea that when the dog comes into our life, we want to give them all of this freedom, like let them know that this house is all yours and you can have all of this space. And for a lot of dogs, and we talk a lot about this for the fearful dog, right? For a lot of dogs, this is too much real estate. It's too much for them to handle, right? So instead of giving them free rein, we need to teach them that this space, this quiet space over here, maybe it's a room, a crate, a cot, a cozy corner, whatever it happens to be, that this is all they're responsible for. They're not responsible for the real estate of the rest of the house. It's actually saying to them, stand down, soldier, right? You don't have to work today. Because we don't want our dogs running around barking at every squirrel, every neighbor, every kid on a bike, all of those things. We don't want them thinking that their job is to have to protect the home. And with no human there to give them the feedback of whether or not this behavior is right or wrong, they're just going to keep doing it. Right? Again, remembering that barking is energy. So having access to run from window to window, jumping up and down, going to different rooms, all of that stuff. The more they bark, the harder it is for them to come down off of that. Right? So one of the hardest things for dogs is being left alone. That's one of the hardest things. And I mentioned this before, but the different barking, right? When we're talking about, we're talking about alert barking right now, but one of the other problems with being left alone is we will get some of the howling and the sadness barking. But one of the hardest things for them is to leave them alone, and them believing now that it's their job to protect this entire house. That's a big job for a dog, and it's exhausting. Okay, so consider limiting your dog's real estate. Consider closing those windows, putting them in a space where you say to them, look, this is your nice cozy corner. This is all you have to do. Every time that I sort of bring this up and I can see when I'm doing like in-person consults, I can see the person kind of shrinking up, and I can tell that they don't like what I'm saying. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? And inevitably it's like, well, I want my dog to have the whole house. And my question back is always, what do you expect the dog to be doing while you're not at home? And that's a good question to ask yourself. What do you expect the dog to be doing when you're not at home. Because if you're expecting the dog to like get out the old Jane Fonda workout tape and do a workout, make themselves a smoothie, maybe curl up on the couch and watch some daytime television, like most people, 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell me, well, I guess I'm expecting them to sleep. Which is what most dogs, if they're calm and they don't have the, like my Noofs don't feel the need to run around and bark out windows. All they do is they sleep. That's it. We call them mobile carpets. They're either sleeping over there or they're sleeping over there, right? For my more high energy dogs, like my Jack Russell, she goes in a crate. She goes in a crate. You know why? Because if I let her run around, she would bark at every single window. She'd get everybody amped up. So she goes in her crate. She likes her crate. She knows that when I'm in my crate, I don't have to do anything right now. I'm off duty. Our other dog, Irie, goes into my son's room. And I will say there is a slight disadvantage to that. And the slight disadvantage is he can see out that window, and that window does lead up to our driveway. And we do, we'll hear him barking when we get out of the car when we're coming home. And then we have to make sure that we calm him down before we let him out. Otherwise, he gets all the other dogs worked up. But it's not horrible, for us in our situation. We don't, we live out in the country. We don't have neighbors that are going to be bothered by Irie barking. So we don't really do anything about it. If it was a problem, we would put Irie in a crate or close the curtains and the window and that sort of thing. But we don't. So my dogs are all different, right? And my dogs are older now too, right? My Noofs are 13. They're not, well, Nigel's not. Nigel's 10. But you know what I'm saying? They're not going to be running around anyway. But the dogs that are running around or would want to run around, they're in crates. We don't give them full access to the house when we're not at home because they don't need all that real estate. They really don't. So when you think about it that way and you think, well, all I really want the dog to be doing is to be comfortable and sleeping, you can make a nice small little room, put a really nice bed. If you want them to be able to have access to water or whatnot, you can put a bowl of water and give them their toys. You can do all of that stuff and make sure that they're safe and they don't have to run around like crazy maniacs and barking. So there you go. All right, next question. Question number 7. Oh, I just read it again and I don't like this. I don't like this conversation. All right, so question number 7 was, what about products like bark shock collars or spraying the dogs with water guns? So, controversial. And I will say this, they're controversial and there's no single answer, and here's how I break it down, okay? So there are 2 types of barking, as I mentioned before. There's the types of barking that happen when you're at home, like alert barking or demand barking. And then there's the kind that happens when you're not there. Also alert barking and separation barking, right? That lonely, howly bark that they do when they are left alone. So how I break this down is if you are at home and your barking issue is when you are at home, there is no need for aversive tools, okay? There's no need for it. Your presence, your relationship, your communication, you should be the reason your dog learns how to regulate themselves, right? All the work that we talk about here, all the stuff that I talk about leadership and fulfillment and all of those things, if you're doing all of those things, 1, you're probably not going to have a barky dog, but 2, if you did, you should be able to go, hey, what are we barking at? Oh, okay, it's just Sally across the street getting her mail. Okay, thanks, buddy. That's good. Let's go do something else. That's all it should take. Will it happen overnight? No. Especially if you've adopted a dog and the dog came with a barking resume and you're like, I didn't sign up for this. It will take a little bit of time. You got to build trust and you got to do all the stuff that we talk about in the Fearless Framework. Even if your dog's not fearless or not fearful, you got to still build that same relationship with your brand new dog. But if you are home, you don't need to use adversives. Okay. Definitely not a water gun, right? Like, I'm just going to put that out there. No water guns. No. I think I don't know if you got the point, but I'm like, no. Like, as soon as I saw water gun, I was like, my face scrunched up. I was like, oh, no. Why would you shoot your gun? Shoot your dog with a water gun? That's no. So that's kind of how I feel about that. When you're home and you're present, you absolutely do not need the tools like that, right? It's your job to build the trust and set the boundaries and communicate clearly with the dog. And your relationship should be the reason that your dog learns, not them being sprayed by a water gun. Okay, this is where it gets like a little different, right? And gets a little bit different for me. If we're talking about when you are not home, all right, let's break this down again too, because we have separation barking and then we have alert barking. I've already told you about what I feel like you need to do for alert barking. Closing the curtains, limiting your dog's space, all of that stuff. Just preventing them from running the loop and the pattern of running to windows and barking at things. Just, you can use furniture, crates, tools, all of that sort of stuff to help limit your dog to do alert barking. Essentially, same thing. We're saying it's not your job. You don't need to do it right now. Okay? Now, the other one is separation barking and barking like when you're not home and dogs just feeling bad about being left alone. It gets a little bit more complicated because it's incredibly stressful for the dog. And this is where, I run back and forth on this because the barking, it's a self-rewarding loop, right? Like they feel bad, so they bark, and then that makes them feel better. And then they, the barking actually just sort of loops itself around. And it's really hard. So one of the things is, we sometimes will want to be able to break the barking and have them stop the barking. And I will say, most times when somebody contacts me about barking, and they're talking about using like anti-bark tools and that sort of thing, it is because they're in a position where they're going to get evicted from their apartment if their dog doesn't stop barking. And I've met so many great people that have done like everything that they can. They've tried to make arrangements to take the dog to work or have people come over and all of that stuff. And they're at an end game. And I'll tell you why it's different for me. I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there that is going to say, nope, there should be under no circumstances should you use an aversive tool to stop a dog from barking. Because either you shouldn't have got the dog, move, whatever. They'll say ridiculous things like that. And I do say it's ridiculous, right? Some people are where they are because that's where they are. And I guess the reason for me feeling differently about it has to do with my background. So if you don't know this about me, my background is in veterinary technology. And one of my jobs as a vet tech was to euthanize pound source dogs that never found homes. And it is awful. It's awful. Every time I say it too, my mind goes back and my mind takes me back to the exact hallway and the freezer and all the dogs. Sorry. Anyway, my point is this. Now, because of my history of seeing how many dogs are euthanized, I would rather see a temporary, and I am going to talk about this, a temporary fixed solution if it meant that that person got to keep their dog. If it meant that that dog didn't go into the shelter system. Because the reality of it is, and as much as we'd like to sit here and go, well, then you should find the dog another home. There are millions of dogs looking for homes. There are so many dogs being euthanized. It isn't pretty on the other side of that. I used to be the person on this side of the dog situation where I could be very judgmental and be like, well, you should just adopt the dog out, or you should just find the dog. If you're not able to take care of that dog, if you're not able to, I used to be that person until I was on the other side. the other side of the closed door. When that dog gets sent to the shelter and it walks through that door, I was the person on the other side of that door that had to push the needle of euthanasia and to end those dogs' lives. And I will tell you that it is awful. And so I've changed how I feel about it. Now, that doesn't mean that I've changed, that I've changed and said that's the only solution. It's not the only solution. And I would say before turning to any adversive tool, I would urge people to first focus on training. I would focus on the mental and physical fulfillment, right? For sure. Leadership and relationship building, proper confinement and structure, and gradual desensitization to being alone. I would encourage people to take advantage of resources around you, like dog walking services, like daycares, there's so many places now where you can bring your dog to work, see if you can bring your dog to work. I would fully do all of that. But if all else failed and you didn't have that opportunity, I would say if you had to resort to using an anti-bark collar or get rid of your dog, I'm leaning more towards using the collar. Now, that being said, anytime that we're talking about any sort of adversive color like that, you want to make sure that you are doing your research. There's a lot of garbage out there, So this wouldn't be a cheap $25 thing. This would be a very expensive thing with lots of testing, lots of reviews, lots of stuff. Okay. And get a trainer to help you with it and all of that stuff. I would be very, very picky about it. And as you can, I haven't had to utilize it or whatnot, but, and I will say this, if I had to choose, gun to my head, if I had to choose between a shock collar and a citronella collar, I would 100% take the shock collar. I think the citronella collars are incredibly cruel when you understand how the dog's nose works. And the idea that if the dog barks, it shoots citronella in their nose. The unfortunate reality of that is that correction stays with them for a long time. So they're still getting punished for a bark that happened an hour and a half ago. To me, that is not great. So, let me go back because I feel like I might have gone off topic there. It's just really hard. It's a really hard topic for me because my heart says, of course, we wouldn't want to do that. And I'm all about, we want to make sure that we understand the dog and we understand the barking and we do all the training. I'm even for training the dog to bark so that you can have an off switch. I'll do all of that stuff. But when it comes to separation, anxiety, barking, confinement barking, all of that stuff, there are things that we can do. And there's so many doggy daycare and doggy walk programs and whatnot that you can enlist your help. Is it going to be a lot more expensive? Yeah, it is. I'll tell you right now, when I ran my daycare, there was a few dogs that came Monday through Friday, because they couldn't be alone, because they would bark and destroy a house, right? And their owners that was part of the expense of the dog. The dog came to see me every single day, got to hang out with me and be with other dogs and run around and play. And then when they went home in the evenings, they were tired. And on the weekends, their owners were home, so they didn't have to worry about it. That's what they did. They never missed a day. Dog was always there, Monday through Friday. And so there's lots of options for this. So I'm not saying this is the first thing that you're going to do, but let's sort of go back. Before I would turn to any adversive tool, I would urge people first to focus on the training. Okay. And that training, especially for confinement, first of all, there's lots of different things. There's a difference between confinement phobia and separation anxiety. And so there are options for dogs that have confinement phobia. And so things like that will be giving them a space where they can go outside and inside and whatnot, and that stops the barking. There's lots of different things. But, understanding the difference between separation anxiety and containment phobia, doing the training on the gradual desensitization. What was that book called? I have that book and I don't have it on me. Can't remember the book. There was a book that actually has the whole breakdown of how to do and deal with dogs with separation anxiety. So there's lots of stuff out there that you can do to help with that. Mental and physical fulfillment. You'd be surprised how many people, when they really start to understand what their dog's fulfillment factor is, how that will change how they feel. A dog that is truly fulfilled and tired, both mentally and physically, is going to have a much better time staying at home by themselves than a dog that hasn't. Okay. Leadership and relationship building, all of that stuff's going to help. So I would do all of that stuff first. Then I would rely on, programs and systems around me and help and all of that stuff. And really weed out all of my options before I would ever turn to an aversive tool, like a bark collar. So that's my controversial answer. And again, I'll reiterate, it has to do with the fact that I've been on the other side of that wall, folks, and it's not fun. It's not fun. It's probably one of the main reasons I'm not a vet tech anymore. So, and also one of the main reasons why I'm so adamant about making life easier with dogs, right? I could do training. I could help with training, but I chose to do this idea of learning how to understand dogs and live with dogs as my way of helping more dogs, because to me, that's the part that not a lot of people focus on. And that's the part that makes it easy, right? That's the part that makes it easy. And this is why I'm so passionate about it, because although I'm not somebody that wants to do obedience trials or do a lot of training or a lot of tricks or whatnot, that's just not who I am. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in it, and I don't believe that it has, a place in people's lives. But if you like it, if you're someone that loves doing that kind of things, I guarantee you doing this work here will make that easier. You have a dog that wants to work for you and with you, and because you're part of it and they love you and all of that stuff, without necessarily have to worry about carrying around that pouch of treats, right? You can give them the treats, but that's not the thing. They're just in it for the bond and the connection. It's such a beautiful thing. So that's why I'm so passionate about all of this. All right. Last question was, anything else you would like to add to this topic? And what I said to her was that I believe, and I do believe this, that the key to everything with dogs is not about forcing them to fit into our human world, which, in my opinion, is a lot of what training is. Training is asking them to be less dog and to confine to our rules. And I'm not saying that doesn't have to happen to some degree, but I think we put too much emphasis on that. Because I think there is something to be said about understanding them better. Right? When we start to learn how to interpret the world, how they see it, how they move through space, what their needs are, and actually kind of meet them where they are, it requires far less training than people think. Less treats, less yelling, less everything. Because dogs are incredibly adaptable, kind, and willing if we are willing to listen to them. So, maybe instead of yelling at our dogs to be quiet, we can quiet ourselves and listen to what they are trying to say. And that was it. That was my response to the answers of the questions about barking. What do you think about that, my friend? How do you feel about that? I know I got a little bit off topic there with the controversial stuff, but it's so hard for me to talk about it. What do you think about that? You have any thoughts about that? Have any tricks that you have to help your dog with barking? Be sure to let us know. Come on over into the free Facebook group, Living Beyond Obedience. Let us know your barking tricks and hacks. If you want to take your relationship to the next level, then I highly recommend you join us over in the Fearless Framework, that 3-step trust-based system to help you and your dog build confidence naturally. And I will say this, it's not a quick fix. But once you start to get it, it just gets easier. Everything gets easier. And that's what we want. I want everything to be easy so that we never, ever even have to think about rehoming our dog. All right, I think that's it for me, my friends. Thank you very much for joining me for this 3-part series on barking. If you have another topic you would like me to talk about here on the podcast, be sure to let me know. Go over to beyondobedience.ca/contact. Scroll down. There's a microphone there. You could say hello, tell me that you're enjoying the podcast, ask me a question, anything you want there. As always, I want you to get out there today, my friend, and be the person that your dog thinks you are. Because your dog thinks that you are amazing. And so do I. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Oh, and one more thing. This podcast is meant for entertainment and education purposes only and is not meant to replace hands-on professional training. If you're really struggling with your dog's dangerous behavior, please reach out to a professional in your area. All right, I think that's it. Bye for now.